I have a Toro self-propelled mower here. It's got the Kohler motor. Been sitting for I think about 2 years and it won't start. So this is going to be our example for today. If you have a different motor, most of the procedure will be the same, just probably screw size and locations of things will be slightly different from this, but you should be able to do it. Some of the fuel treatments out there do not actually work as they say, so some of them I don't recommend. We have this Startron, which I recommend. I can go over that at the end of the video, but that's what I use. It actually treats the fuel for the ethanol and stabilizes it as well. So but if you do not have a stabilizer in the fuel and it's been sitting for a year or more, most likely you know it's bad. And one of the easiest ways to tell, you take off the cap and you can smell in there a little bit, not too much because you don't want to pass out, but smell it, and if you know what good fuel smells like and this smells bad, then you know right away that the fuel's bad. So this one, the gas smells stale, so I know it's bad, and it's been sitting for 2 years, so definitely bad fuel. So first thing we're gonna do is drain the tank, and then we'll clean the carburetor. A bucket to drain the old fuel in. You're gonna need carb cleaner, so if you don't have carb cleaner, you got to pick that up. Also, it's always good to have a rag, and then of course you're going to need fresh fuel. So those are the main things you're going to need to do this. And as you can see, we're outside here working in the woods, so basically you can do this anywhere. If you have a garage or a shop, that's ideal. Next, we're going to remove this air filter cover and the air filter, and that's going to expose the nuts that hold the carburetor on. So this is actually a 10 millimeter on this motor. This is where some of your motors might vary, and I'm gonna undo these carburetor mount nuts. So next, take the breather hose off this cover. A lot of them have that as well, and make sure when you put this back together you connect that again. This actually has another line down here. So there we go, we got the cover off. So once that cover's off, your carburetor should be free, but before we can take it off, there's some things you got to remove too. So this one, the gasket's nice and free, so be careful not to ruin any gaskets. We'll clean these up before we put them back on. But if you wreck any gaskets, that could create an air leak. You could suck in dirt, it could run wrong, so make sure any of the gaskets you're taking off, be very careful not to tear them, or else you'll have to replace them. So we're going to try to do this without replacing anything. Best thing you can do is to buy a gasket set and also a carburetor rebuild kit if you can, but I'm not going to do that today. This is just going to be a carb cleaning without the rebuild kit. So alright, so we got the fuel line hose clamp off. We're going to try to get the fuel line off here. Now this one you also got to be careful with not to damage your fuel line, so see, a lot of times I try to pop it with the screwdriver first if they're stuck on like this one is. So what I did is I stuck the flathead in between the carburetor and the fuel line and wiggled it free, and then I just pulled it back by hand. But sometimes if you grab with pliers, if you grab the fuel line with pliers and just try twisting it and breaking it free, you'll actually tear your line up, which will make it leak. And I left the tank empty after we drained it. That way it shouldn't be dripping much. There'll probably be a little bit. I'm going to tuck it up top here. You can clamp it as well. That way if there's any fuel, it's not dripping. This motor has its automatic choke system, so it actually heats up some coils in this mechanism here. Comes around and runs the choke, so once it heats up, it turns the choke off. So this motor, we're going to have to take off this whole assembly off the carburetor. A lot of motors don't have that. If you get a primer bulb or other choke system, you're just going to have to disconnect all these linkages from the carburetor. You got your throttle cable as well, so you're going to have to get those off in order to take the carburetor off. We got one more screw right here for the choke assembly. I don't have my ideal tool set with me either. Coming from a full garage to being out in the woods here, I'm limited with the tools I have on hand, but you just make do with what you got. Also, make sure you put all these screws into a good bin. If you lose one, that can make your small repair into a headache. So let's see if we can get this choke assembly off. Sometimes you got to move some of the linkages around. That way you can line them up and pull them out. So got that out. Make sure you don't lose any pieces here. All right, so now that that's free, I can slide the carb out. Just this. And we got to get the throttle linkage done. So again, rotating it, and as you can see, I don't know if you can see it, you got to line up that groove. See, once you open it up, you line up the groove to get the cable out. And also there's a spring here, so you got to bend that and pull it out of its hole. Don't damage the spring because it really does need to be there. So now the carburetor's off and we can start cleaning. Alright, so again on this carb, it's all seems like 10 millimeters metric, but I'm gonna take off the drain if I can. The drain one on the side, since this carburetor has it. Not all of them have it, but I'm gonna drain the bowl. That way I don't make as much of a mess. Drain all the old fuel out. Sometimes you have to actually place them down and push down on it. Make sure you don't bend anything or break anything, but to get enough torque onto that and remove it. So get the bowl off of here. Alright, so this actually doesn't look too bad. You see a little bit of buildup. Some crystals or gel might be in the bottom. Then you'll have more of a mess to deal with. But this one wasn't too bad, so hopefully a quick carb clean and this will be good to go. Let's see here. So I'm going to take off this float pen. I just grabbed it with the needle nose. I'm going to pull it out. Make sure you have somewhere good to put this, and be careful when you pull it out. Your needle is going to come out with it, so make sure you don't lose any of this. And this is actually all clean. This needle actually has a rubber seat on it, and that's what seals the fuel from coming out. So it looks clean. I'm not gonna touch that. Sometimes when you spray with the carb cleaner, you gotta be very careful, because the carb cleaner can actually make the rubber gaskets and like, see this rubber tip, it can actually make it swell and warp so that it's not going to work properly. So if something's clean like this, I'm not going to touch it with carb cleaner because it actually could cause damage. So we're going to put this off to the side and work on the carb. The spray hose, and be very careful with this carb cleaner. It's good to wear gloves, which I don't have right now, and safety glasses, because any of this stuff is very bad for you. Get in your eyes or even on your skin, it's bad. So make sure to be very careful and wash off as soon as you can. So we're going to spray in the main jet you can actually take it out too, but I'm going to spray in, stick the hose right in there if you can see, and you can fit it right into the jet and spray through, holding above the container and away from yourself. Alright, so that's the main, that's where most of the issues are caused. And let's see, I don't know if you'll be able to see it in here, but I'll bring the bucket over. I'm going to spray back through there and see if we can see. You want to make sure it's coming through into the inside of the carburetor. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. I can see it. It is coming through. You can see it through the main body, so it's not clogged. We're getting good flow, so that's good and free and clear. Now you can spray where the needle goes. This one, as I showed, it has the rubber tip on the needle, so that's how it seals, which I'm not going to touch because of carb cleaner. Some of them actually have a rubber gasket seat inside, and if that's the case, I do not usually spray carb cleaner because you can make that swell, like I said. If you need to, you can get the carb kit for your carburetor and pull that out, but this one's a different carb, so we're not going to go into that. But I'm going to spray through here since there's nothing in there besides for metal, just to make sure it's clean and free. So that's good. On the back side of the carburetor where the choke is, this carburetor has these little I'm not even sure, more jets, so I'm going to spray those out. Be careful again not to get any on you. So I'm going to spray that one out, spray this other one out. Again, I'm not sure the technical name for those, but I just like to make sure everything's clean. Give it another shot. Alright, another point here. I'm gonna take that off and clean that one as well, so let's get going on that here. It looks like you need a Phillips head, but I'm going to use this flat head because it looks like it's going to fit. We're going to take out the idle screw. Make sure you see where it's set to. There's barely any tip coming out on that side, so I'm going to take that out. It's been a little while since I've done all these different carbs, but that's why I always look over your carb, and you know, they're all slightly different. Make sure you get everything cleaned up, otherwise you put it all back together and it might have a heavy surge to it still. So you're better off doing it once, do a good job. Just make sure you take care of your gaskets and O-rings. And so I'm going to clean around this. Again, usually I would blow everything off with my air compressor, but limited here, so we can still do it. And then this cap should just pop up. Yep. Alright. So I just popped that up. Usually they have more O-rings on them. And that's another a jet in there. So we'll put that down. I'm going to try to clean some of this gunk out without having to go back in to its little port. That way when we put it back together, hopefully I'm not knocking any of the dirt into that hole. There's some holes in there. I'm going to line up my hose from the carb cleaner and spray in there. Alright, so that actually comes out one of those back ones we were just cleaning. I'm going to hit both these again and see if it comes out of there, which it is. Perfect. Clean up this piece we removed here. Alright, so yep, this piece does have O-rings like I had thought. I'm gonna be very careful not to get any on the O-rings, carb cleaner that is, but I do want to spray through. Probably can't even see it. Spray through because that has a tiny little porthole, and that can actually cause the surging as well. So I'm going to be very careful, hopefully not to get those O-rings. Just give it a little bit. Probably even dunk it in the gas to get some of that carb cleaner off the O-rings. It's because I don't want them to swell up and then they won't fit into they won't seat properly. So all right. That should be good for that. Alright, now I'm going to go through the carb one more time quick, clean it up. Now that we got all the plastic pieces off and O-rings and gaskets, and give it another shot of carb cleaner and make sure everything's clean and good before we put it back together. Luckily, as I showed, this bowl is pretty clean. I'm going to spray it out, just the bottom of it. Some of you guys might have to take quite a while and get yours cleaned out good, but luckily this one was in pretty good shape, so don't have to spend much time on this one. I'm gonna go wash my hands and then we'll put the carburetor back together. Alright, got the hands clean. Gonna start getting this thing put back together here. Alright, and since I didn't clean off the entire carb, gotta be very careful not to knock any of this dirt into the carb if possible. I always look to make sure nothing got knocked in there. All your pieces are clean before you put it back together. One speck of dirt can cause some issues, so always double check. So we got that in. Now you gotta put your little idle screw back in because that's actually what holds it in place on this one. So I'm getting that screwed back in, and I'm gonna make sure it's threaded into about where it was before. The tip just coming through a decent amount, so that looks good to me. I'm gonna leave it right there. It's holding it down properly, so that's good. Alright, now we're gonna put the float back in. Make sure everything looks clean. You got a little bit of dirt on it. I'm gonna avoid spraying this with carb cleaner. It should be fine because it's plastic, but I'm not taking the needle off and it all looks clean, so I'm gonna just clean it off from what I can see, and everything looks good. Alright. So now we're gonna line up the needle, put it back on, and then grab the pin, and you got to line up the float mount holes through here. Get the pin back through. Sometimes you got to wiggle it and see where you're at. Let's see here. Alright. And then push it through so it's even on both sides. That looks good. Alright. I always check, like I said, make sure you don't see any dirt anywhere. Yep. Got a little bit right there. Try to get all that out if you can. Blow the float bowl out. Gasket O-ring looks pretty good, so luckily, cross our fingers, we don't have to replace that. I'm going to set that back on, and then you got your bolt or screw here that holds everything on. Make sure you got your gasket on the bottom and it's in good shape, otherwise you'll have a leaky carb. If any of these gaskets are bad, you got to replace them. Usually each carburetor is common enough on these that they have a kit, a rebuild kit that can come with everything. So if you need to, you'll just have to pick up the carburetor rebuild kit for your motor that you have. Alright, so now we got the carburetor back together. I know I got to tighten up the bowl, but I'm gonna make sure that I have it set in the right spot to make sure we can drain the carburetor later on if need be. Actually, I just noticed on this carburetor too, this thing actually answers our questions because it has this special slot here, so the bowl can only go one. Make sure if you got that, you line it up. Now I'm going to tighten it down, finger tight. I'm going to use this as a base to get my leverage and torque. Now don't overdo it. This is all weak metal. You just want to snug it down good. Just tight enough. Hopefully you can feel it out. Alright, I'm going to tighten up my drain down. Again, just nice and snug. Alright, so before we get this put back together, this has a lot of dirt on this gasket. I'm going to just clean it up. That's good. Gonna put it back on here. Gasket, make sure all the holes and the shape, everything looks like it's the same way. Easy way to tell, but I always just double check all that. Alright, let's get the carburetor ready here. Now we're gonna go in reverse from what we did. So let's get the throttle hooked up. Alright, so I'm going to clip the spring in. Hopefully you guys can all see this well. Get the spring clipped in. This is on this side, so you're not going to be able to see it too well, but without overstretching the spring or damaging it. Spring's in. Now you gotta rotate this valve again if you remember to get the throttle linkage in. Then when it rotates back, it keeps it locked in. So that's in. We're gonna slide the carburetor down a hair. Now let's get this choke worked in here. Again, you usually always have to rotate. Actually, this one looks like it's not gonna have to. Usually you have to rotate, get things lined up, that way you can go back in. So get this on here. Gonna grab the small screws. So rotate this out of the way. Get this screw started. Again, sometimes having the proper tools really help out greatly. So get that started. Get this screw started. Usually I would place the screw onto the bit tip and get it threaded in. But Right. So now I always like to just double take a look, make sure everything looks like it's rotating good, smoothly. All the linkage looks like it's connected properly. See the little crack right here. I'm going to cut it just at that. After that, I'll get the fuel line on. Usually you have to wiggle it on. Right. Put the clamp back on. Now we can get the covers back on. Alright, so as I said earlier, gonna make sure your gaskets are nice and clean. Make sure all your surfaces that are getting mounted to are clean, like on the carburetor here. Make sure everything's cleaned up. There's nothing that's going to be causing an air leak. Let's make sure everything's cleaned up good. The ports aren't covered by the gasket over here on the side. And then I also got the groove from the cover on the outside, and everything looks like it's all lined up properly, so that way you know the gasket's on right. If it's not, your motor might not run too well, or it might not run at all in certain cases, but usually it just won't run right. So alright, now we got the cover. It's always good to clean out where the air filter would go. That way you just don't suck any dust in after. Alright, now we're going to connect all these hoses that were connected to it before. It's always good to make sure you get the routing the correct way too, whether it goes above or below the fuel line. Just make sure everything's routed correct. Always good, if you don't know, take pictures as you're taking it apart. That way you can go off the pictures when you're putting it back together, and then you know everything's back together properly. So alright, put the nuts back on here. Now these ones, again, make sure you tighten them enough, but don't torque them down, because carburetors are made out of pretty weak metal, and then also you got these plastic covers, so make sure, I go a little bit at a time on each one. Make sure you tighten them down even, and then just tighten them down nice and snug, not too crazy, but get enough in there. It's hard to explain without going off torque specs, but get the feel of it, and tighten it down good enough that you know it's not going to come loose, but don't over. If you have a new air filter, it's ideal to throw air filter in at this point, unless if yours is still good. This one's not terrible, but I do not have a replacement on hand, so it's actually not bad, so I'm going to put it in, but it's always good to throw a new air filter in. So this one, hold it in, and then it just clips in up top. Make sure it clips in on both sides. Clipped in on the bottom, clipped in on top. Now before you go to try to start your motor, make sure you always check your oil for proper level and quality of it, and change if need be. If you know the oil needs to get changed, or if it's got not any in it, make sure you do that before you run it. After doing all this work, you don't want to run into any issue. Huge tip, if it's been sitting for a while, make sure you check for a mouse nest in there. If there's any grass coming out on the sides, or if you see any grass, leaves, mouse nest, debris in the cover areas anywhere, make sure you look for that, because if you run the motor with a mouse nest in there, you could potentially catch it on fire. You could overheat your motor. There could be a lot of issues with that. One of the reasons why your motor might not be running is because the mouse or mice could have chewed up a wire in there. So make sure you look, see if there is any mouse nest debris that you can see, and if you need to, you'll have to pull off the covers and clean that out. But that's a different process that we're not going to take care of today, because this one looks good. I see a little bit of grass, but nothing that shows signs of mice, so we're going to continue. And of course, make sure the fuel you're putting in it is also fresh fuel, because if you put old fuel in it, you could run right back into the same situation and have to flush out the whole system again. So make sure you're putting brand new fresh fuel in there, and you can go ahead and start it up if everything else looks good. So another thing I like to check once I add the fuel again is just to make sure nothing's leaking from the bottom of the carb, and check on that maybe a couple times after I add the fuel, and then after I have it sit in or run it for a while. Always just double check to make sure you don't have any fuel leaks. Also on that note, good to check your fuel lines as well, especially how I had to clip mine, make sure there's no leaks. Alright, and to finish off the video, just remember to always dispose of your fuels and oils properly. And this is that Startron that I had mentioned. You can look into that. I highly recommend it. Been using it for years, and I use it all the time. Alright, remember, it may take quite a few pulls to get it going, get the fuel going through it. So be patient when you're trying to start it for the first time. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this helped some of you out, hopefully. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. And I'm going to put a couple of these out from time to time, so hopefully see you on the next one. Thanks.